Natural hazards. The most immense fears of mankind. Typhoons, tsunamis, earthquakes, each of them capable of obliterating our best defense systems and killing millions. Today, we'll be looking at how the king of typhoons, Haiyan, has exposed mankind's frailty and demonstrated nature's power. Typhoons can occur in any warm oceans with more than 10 degrees north or south of the Earth's equator. Typhoon is the name of these storms that occur in the Western Pacific, including waters around Japan, China, Taiwan, North and South Korea, as well as the Philippines. The thunderstorms convert the moisture into heat. The heat causes more air to flow to the center of the storm, causing evaporation. All the heat and air flow towards the eye, creating the typhoon. The large storm system has a circular or spiral system of violent winds, typically hundreds of miles in diameter. The winds spiral around a region of low atmospheric pressure. For stronger typhoons, a characteristic structure called the eye forms when the maximum wind speeds exceed about 85 miles per hour, or 140 kilometers per hour.
I learned the ice skater principle, about where the arms are out here, and as you spiral around and you go faster and faster and faster to the center, and the maximum winds are in the eye wall.
The eye is a region of clear air with no clouds, and is tens of kilometers in diameter. The energy that powers typhoons come from the evaporation of warm ocean water. The water vapor rises to the top of the typhoon along the sides of the eye, then condenses into clouds. Warmer ocean water produces more powerful typhoons, which can grow into super typhoons.
There are various different ways you can quantify and qualify the impacts of typhoons. First, when you look at the physical processes involved, we're talking about the impact of the torrential rain and the flooding, the threats from the wind, as well as the storm surge. These all pose significant risks and hazards in typhoons as they make landfall.
On November 8th, the residents of Tacloban witnessed a large swirling typhoon heading their way. This was the super typhoon Haiyan, which started off as a low-pressure area in the Pacific 6 days ago. Unfortunately, no one on land realized the severity of the storm, as they thought this was one of the tropical cyclones they faced each year.
It was not an alarming thing for us. We've been used to typhoon, and so it was not something extraordinary.
The super typhoon was fueled by ideal conditions, low wind shear and warm Pacific Ocean. The Philippines is particularly vulnerable to typhoons because of the vast expanse of water, acting as a birthplace for storms and a few pieces of land to slow them down. For the 5 days as the typhoon crossed the sea, it rapidly rose in intensity. Finally, at 4:40 a.m., Typhoon Haiyan had reached land as it roared ashore near Guinan, where ground stations recorded sustained winds about 235 kilometers per hour. With record wind speeds of 270 kilometers per hour, Haiyan is so large in diameter that its clouds spanned over 2/3 of the country, which stretched more than 1,850 kilometers. Tropical storm force winds were extending 240 kilometers from the typhoon center. This was the beginning of a long night. It has become clear that this storm was of unusual intensity.
We never consider the storm surge. Even the forecaster, if I'm not mistaken, never mentioned about the storm surge and the destruction that it will bring us.
News reports noted that as many as 1 million people took refuge in temporary shelters before the storm hit. In the eastern province Leyte, the coastal town of Tacloban is swamped by a storm surge with waves of up to 15 meters, causing further destruction to coastal areas in the immediate path of Haiyan. This only worsened the situation and increased their vulnerability to the merciless typhoon. In just 24 hours, the lives of thousands of Tacloban residents were shattered by the devastating aftermath of Typhoon Haiyan. Typhoon Haiyan resulted in 6,340 confirmed deaths, 28,689 injured, with over 1,000 still missing. Another way of quantifying the impact of Typhoon Haiyan is to review the damage it caused throughout different sectors. These sectors include social, agricultural, and infrastructural damages in the process. It is difficult to inspect the impact of each sector. Therefore, organizations often estimate the total economic costs of typhoons, allowing the public to get a rough idea of how much damage has been done. In just a few days, Haiyan has transformed Philippines, an emerging market star with an annual growth rate of 7.6% faster than China, to a state of national calamity. The Asian Development Bank estimates that losses from typhoons and earthquakes cost the Philippines around $1.6 billion each year. But Haiyan alone has caused over 12 billion total loss, or 5% of the nation's economic output. This shows that the damage caused by Haiyan is proportional to its size. In the worst hit areas of Leyte province, sugarcane and rice productions are major industries, and the typhoon hit 4 of the country's biggest rice-producing provinces at the beginning of the harvest season.
In general, typhoons can bring chaos to society and disrupt its functionality. After Haiyan struck, the electricity and telephone cables were destroyed. Thus, the residents were unable to maintain the original standard of living with no lighting and were unable to call for help. The destroyed roads and ports also made it more difficult for rescue forces to arrive. When Haiyan struck, the government had their army and disciplinary forces stand by. These forces can perform a wide array of functions, such as helping the locals pile up sandbags, evacuate the locals, participate in rescue operations, or to maintain order. Often, when a typhoon hits a developing nation, it will also create a huge impact on its societal order. When Haiyan came, survivors seized the chance to raid empty stores or homes, looting food, fresh water, and first aid supplies, bringing chaos and distraught to the community. Finally, Haiyan brought heavy rain, which led to flooding. The flooding carried sewage to ground level, and victims who came in contact with the sewage will likely become sick. To support sanitation in the area, and the fact that there are many people taking refuge in a small and cramped area, diseases such as measles can quickly spread, turning it into an epidemic. This is why the World Health Organization and UNICEF made it a top priority to vaccinate the survivors.
Juvelin Taniega sought shelter from the storm surge in this bus with her husband and 6 children. She survived. They were swept away.
And has anyone come to help you?
I really want to see them, she says, even if it's just their bodies. She has found the body of her husband and shows us the bodies of 3 of her children. She's covered the kids as best she can. Now she searches for her 3 other children. She doesn't believe they survived the storm.
Where will you sleep tonight?
There in the street. Anywhere. I don't know where I go.
So what can countries like the Philippines and other developing countries do to try and prevent these sorts of disasters from happening? And I personally feel like one of the most important things that can be done is a real investment in educating the people who live in these danger zones, the people who, especially the poorer people who live in these basically flimsily built shanty type houses.
Most people would think if a typhoon as strong as Haiyan struck Hong Kong, the only impact would be a Typhoon 10 warning and a day off from school. But is that really true? Let's listen to what expert storm chaser James Reynolds has to say to this.
If a storm like Haiyan were to hit Hong Kong, it would be a serious disaster, not only in terms of potential loss of life, but economically. First of all, Hong Kong hasn't been hit by what I would call a significant serious typhoon for many, many years. So in that time, there's been a lot of development of the infrastructure in Hong Kong. You look at all these huge skyscrapers which have gone up, all the road infrastructure and the MTR system. Are these really geared up to deal with a storm like Typhoon Haiyan? I really bet they're not.
James thinks that if Haiyan were to strike Hong Kong, the damage will still be far greater than what we have seen. Although Haiyan has done irreversible damage to the Philippines, surprisingly, it has also done some good. The storm was able to highlight the fragile and patchy infrastructure after decades of neglect and corruption. It has also demonstrated the weakness within the nation's response system. as aid was unable to arrive in time. Hopefully, the government will learn from their mistakes and this tragic disaster will be the last of its kind.